Action Comics presents the Doomsday Special Issue 1. Dan Waters writing with Eddie Barrows on art, at least in the main story anyway, because there was a backup. I guess that this is not an annual just because they already had one, I think. Yeah. So they've called it the Doomsday Special instead. Couldn't they just call it, I mean, I guess it's not annual at that point, but they could just call it Annual Issue 2? 2023, maybe?
But then it's not an annual, then it's a biannual.
True.
Yeah, so... I mean, they could have just called it the Action Comics Special, right? Is that what they did?
Oh, Action Comics presents the Doomsday Special.
Yeah, I don't know. I did enjoy this.
I mostly did. What I'll say, so I think it does feel a little bit overlong for what it is, because the middle of it where they're just kind of in hell doing stuff does feel like it's just kind of I don't want to say repetitive, but it goes on a bit long. But so the story of this is that Kara has a nightmare, which, by the way, we just had a nightmare event. Like I got like red flags at the start of this when she starts talking about nightmares. Don't worry though, much more interesting here.
Yes.
She basically has a nightmare about Doomsday, and her and Clark are sitting at the table talking about Doomsday, and she says, hey, what was it like when he killed you? And he basically talks about it, about how, you know, it was the first time he ever really felt tired in his life, was when he was like trying to throw punches against Doomsday, and then things went black, and it was this, you know, this was like nothing he'd ever fought before. You know, he really sells up the idea of how bad Doomsday is. And then, you know, she leaves, you know, when the kids come in, and it's a whole thing. And basically, I was like, oh, this is all very nice. It's a shame that Doomsday... Because the reference in this book that Doomsday popped back up during Lazarus Planet, and that he popped back up during something else as well. And I'm like...
Yeah, it was during Lazarus Planet, and I remember reading it, but I forgot about it until this minute. Until I sat down to read it. So I don't even know if we talked about that one. But it was something that I remember reading that, like... It was almost like the PTSD that was Doomsday was manifesting because of the Lazarus Rain, and this one guy was kind of the bulwark of it, and Johns tries to help him through it, and he ends up being consumed by the memory of Doomsday, and it kind of self-destructs, and you know, we end up seeing him running through hell later, right? But yeah, it was this thing that I completely forgot had happened until they brought it up here.
Yeah, all I was going to say there is that I feel like, you know, this would feel like really cool if this was the first time Doomsday had been brought up in a long time, but because it's like the Lazarus Rain was like earlier this year, like that's not that long ago. It feels like he pops up maybe a bit too often. That said though, I like this idea of really being scared of him, and it turns out this nightmare wasn't really just a nightmare. This was Martian Manhunter transmitting to Kara, because so what was the guy's name? Is it RC? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, I believe so.
So he, like, you know, there's all these thoughts of Doomsday and Kryptonian going towards Martian Manhunter, and he couldn't really decrypt it, so he sent it to Kara so that she could understand it and maybe tell him what's going on. Notably, did not send it to Clark, because Clark was actually killed by Doomsday and might be too traumatic for him. I like that little detail. That's why
I do too, and it's like because you got to figure out why does this not go to Clark, but just the idea too that Kara has her own relationship with Doomsday, as you know what Doomsday was on Krypton, right? It was kind of like this myth of science that's been perverted, and you know, and they don't believe in a god, right, in the singular, you know, creator being.
No, she talks about how like there's gods and stuff on Krypton, but they're more treated like myths and legends as opposed to anyone actually worshipping them as a church kind of thing.
But Doomsday did feel like, because he was this perverted sense, you know, that Krypton was a society based on science, that he was this twisted science experiment that went wrong, and it kind of represented all the ills of Krypton, you know. So the idea that she's the one that's going to go up against us, the Kryptonian that actually remembers Krypton itself, I thought was a real nice touch.
Yeah, and there's a really nice page here where Martian Manhunter touches her head to sort of like read the dream back from her perspective. And it's like his fingers are on her forehead, but then inside her head it's all this fire and like Doomsday's hands coming up. It's really, really nice. Also, I said it was Eddie Barrows on art, but like I do want to mention that Eber Ferreira is also credited in here as well.
Yeah, it usually works with Eddie Barrows. Doing inks and colors and stuff too.
Yeah, so basically though, when he touches her head, they get pulled into hell. And it basically turns out that Doomsday is a lot like Freddy Krueger, where the power comes from people believing in him. In fact, same with hell itself. Hell only exists because enough people on Earth believe in it. I love, again, Dan Waters doing this type of metaphysical storytelling. We saw it in Night Terrors, right? Him doing it here again, where hell exists, but only exists because enough people believe in it. And, if you can get enough people to change their minds, right, it'll change aspects of hell. Yeah. So there's all these like tortured souls here, and then Doomsday eventually comes out. Honestly, that first panel, well, not the first panel, but it's like the bottom half of the page where he comes out and he's biting like the demon or whatever it is. I was like, he looks like a demented version of Bowser from Super Mario Brothers in that panel.
Kind of. You're not wrong.
Yeah,
it's all the spikes and almost like a turtle shell.
Yeah, it's because of the angle that you're looking at him. But so it turns out he's been basically gaining this following in hell amongst all the demons and wayward souls because they're all giving him more strength by believing in him. And it's basically him trying to will himself back into existence. And what's happened here is that the person who sent a message out to Martian Manhunter to lure him and Kara in here turns out to effectively be the devil. Technically, he's the first of the fallen is his actual name, but he's effectively the devil. And he doesn't like that Doomsday is taking all this power and hell from him.
Yeah, he doesn't like the competition.
Yes.
So in DC, you have the whole, I would call it the Abrahamic God and devil, right? You have this is the first of the fallen, and then they've referred to Big G God as the one above all, And those characters very rarely get brought up just because of it has to be like a Morrison level writer that kind of plays at those because it can get super dodgy, and I feel like Waters really played it in here because the first of the fallen does not feel like Neron or Satanus or any of those type or even Trigon.
No,
there is a sinisterness to him that kind of rides that.
He looks more like
line.
He looks more like a dark elf with just this big red cloak on. But like Doomsday is trying to build up like enough power from getting everyone to be scared of him that he can break through the big door that will lead him back into the real world. So we get Kara is given this like devil armor to fight Doomsday, which cool enough. And there's a lot of good art like mixed in here. Like I want to point out, there's a panel where like Martian Manhunter's like on fire basically, and that looks really great. The hordes of like demons or like lost souls kind of watching the fight and stuff like that. There's a lot of good stuff in here. But the fight does go on for a little bit, which is the one thing I'd maybe critique the issue for, is that it feels like we're just kind of doing fighting back and forth a bit. But ultimately, Martian Manhunter tries to like connect to all the souls down here to convince them to hope instead of fear. Which doesn't quite work, but they end up all coming together and like basically barricading the door with themselves to the point where they actually merge together into like a membrane that covers the door and seals it shut. It's actually kind of disgusting and very like
it's body horror.
It's body horror, yeah. It's not quite H.R. Giger, but it's like like some sort of like weird Cronenberg like flesh looking texture.
It kind of reminds me of Reanimator kind of stuff, where it's kind of all goopy, right? Like when they kind of all merge together.
Yeah, because like at first it's just like you can sort of see that it's just a mass of bodies, but then the next couple of pages it does just look like sort of strings of like flesh and stuff that are all just connected now.
Yeah.
So that stuff's kind of cool.
I do like too that it's one soul in particular that Martian Manhunter's like, they didn't have to, right? They didn't feel the hope, but they chose to do this anyways.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if Kara and Jean did have an influence in hell. And it was just enough to have a tipping point to where they go into self-preservation mode, right? And it's not just to save the day, right? They're still acting and, as people in hell would, right?
Yeah. So, Devil, for lack of a better word, sends Kara and Jean back to the real world. and they're like, hey, that was kind of depressing and kind of hopeless, but hey, we'll just try and make the best of the world, I guess. And the final page is basically mimicking that very first couple of pages of Death of Superman, which is Doomsday trying to punch his way out of this flesh wall. And it's the same vertical panels, and it's like the idea that maybe he'll break out someday still. And it says, Doomsday's story continues in the pages of Superman and Action Comics. So this is leading to something.
Yeah.
So it seems like it might be relevant going forward. But it was a pretty solid read, I would say. Like I like it being a Karen Jean focused story. That was kind of neat. I liked some of the mythology it built up about hell and the idea of like fear giving Doomsday power. Because I kind of like the idea that the science behind Doomsday is that his body, like once he's killed by something, he's able to sort of like defend against that the next time, right? He's always like evolving from whatever hits him. He gets stronger. I love the idea of that, like continuing to a point where he even like starts to find a way to come back from death through this meta reason of like, oh, if everyone believes I exist, I can come back from even that, you know?
Yeah, it's Doomsday as an idea, not just like the character Doomsday, right? But it's almost Waters having commentary too on, you know, if enough people believe that the world's ending, is it not ending, right? So if enough people start to believe in this creature, even if they're these wayward souls, we're going to be into trouble, right? Because it's Doomsday as an idea. And I love that, because I'm not huge on Doomsday, just because every time a writer tries to bring him up, it's always, you know, like we're kind of seeing it in Jurgens, right, in the back of Action Comics with what's his name, Doombreaker, and that kind of stuff. And it just seems like the same note played on different instruments. Here, this is a whole new take on Doomsday, and it even fits in with the Morrison Action Comics idea of Super Doom and what that represents. You know, it's not just this physical manifestation of Doomsday. It's Doomsday to a culture. It's, you know, across the spectrum. And I like the idea here too that Doomsday is a singular organism, right? There's only one, right? So if he's in hell, he will find a way out eventually. You know, now is this going to be a problem down the line? Is it going to be a, you know, because I'm trying to see how this is going to fit into Superman and Action Comics, right? And this feels to me more like along the lines of that whole kind of Arthurian thing that Philip Kennedy Johnson did with the super family and the future and whatnot, and like how would they respond to Doomsday? That was my first thought here, because and this the whole idea of the House of L standing together against the thing that killed, you know, the forebear and all this other stuff. It's a whole idea. I just can't seem to make it fit into Williamson's with everything that we got in there right now with Supercore.
I'd be surprised, but maybe they'll do like a crossover event or something.
Yeah, but I hope Dan Waters has a part in it, because I'm really enjoying the metaphysicalness. It's up there with the kind of Ram V, you know, when Ram V writes about ideas, you know, it's kind of up there with me on here. And I get why Connor likes Dan Waters as much as he does, you know?
I suspect maybe he'll end up, the fact that he wrote this might suggest that maybe he'll end up writing a backup in one of the super books going forward or something. If he hasn't already been, I can't really remember who's been on those. So there's a backup here though, which is still Dan Waters, and this is this character RC that you were mentioning from the Lazarus Reign story, the one who Doomsday was using to try and get into the world, that Martian Manhunter helped, and RC effectively sent himself to hell to take Doomsday with him. So RC's still in hell, but he's in a different circle of hell. So they're talking about Dante's 7 circles of hell. And he's on this other level, and this, you know, demon or whatever he is coming after him with... Now, they call them Doomhounds, but I was like, why not just Doomsday Dogs? Like, that's alliteration, baby.
Yeah, because I'm feeling that they're trying to go after the Hellhound Doomsday.
Yeah, I guess.
Portmanteau, which I kind of like because it's showing Doomsday's impression on hell, right? That he's even warping the Hellhounds, right, by his mere presence being there.
Yeah, so I am curious about this in the sense that it's building up more of this mythology about how Dan Waters and DC are going to treat hell and all that stuff. But, you know, I have not little context for this character so far. So him realizing that because he's in hell and because he was tethered to Martian Manhunter, he can basically have some of Martian Manhunter's powers by turning into this hero in hell. And that maybe hell should have its own superhero. Like, that is kind of interesting that there's a superhero in hell.
The Superman of Hell, as I believe, as he calls himself. And just the idea, too, it was the Martian Manhunter identity that people seem to forget about, of Bloodwind, right? Who was effectively killed by Doomsday, right? Like, that was part of the death of Superman. Just the idea that he's down there now. He's taken on this personification to be the Superman of Hell. It's such a great idea.
Yeah, and there's like another demon watching him by the end. It just says to be continued in the pages of Action Comics. So I suspect there might be a backup coming in action with this. I do appreciate that because he's in hell. There's still kind of a villainous look to some of his outfit. Like he's still got the long Dracula like collar on his cape.
Yeah,
you know?
Well, and I like the chains around his wrist too. It gives him a vibe. Something that's broken out. But again, getting big Spawn vibes from what I know about Spawn.
Well, the chains especially made me think of Spawn, because Spawn's got a whole chain thing going with his outfit and powers.
I'm gonna see this whole Bloodwind DC. Why even that it came up, right? Like, was it like a response to in April '92 is when he first debuted, created by Dan Jurgens. So. I wouldn't be surprised, but yeah, just the idea of Hell having a Superman, and that also fits in with what Philip Kennedy Johnson's been doing about the Superman as an idea, and this fits in with. This is almost a counter to Doomsday as an idea, is now that Superman.
So when you say this character, I don't remember this character from Death of Superman. Is this literally that character, or is this a new version of that character?
This is a new version of the character. Bloodwind was was an identity of Jean Johns.
Okay.
That he was. Yeah, his alter ego was Raphael Arce, or RC. I'm trying to see. In recent times, he gets up on the gym.
Wait, so this was just an alias of Jean back in the day, but somehow
I believe so. I'm just trying to check, because it was revealed that Bloodwind that died, in quotes, was Jean. So I know they are tied somehow.
So what I'm asking though is this just them being cute and they've sort of made this its own character and they're referencing that Jean had this name at one point, or are they actually going to like say and reveal here that this character is like somehow Jean split off into like two or something like that?
That's what I'm checking right now, because it's the character biography that's listed in Wiki right now is very all over the place. That it involves a demon named Rot and a blood gem and all this other stuff. But I believe that Martian Manhunter, because of the psychic part of it, became a part of Bloodwind, and Bloodwind became a part of him. So I know he fought he was with the Justice League when he fought Doomsday.
Yeah, it's been so long since I read Death of Superman. I don't even know. And I'm pretty sure when I read it, there was probably other characters that I didn't know then that I would obviously know now, but.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't say Bloodwind.
So this is what it was. It says, in recent times, the demon Rot sucked Bloodwind into the gem and held him captive while mind-controlling Martian Manhunter, compelling him to wear the gem and impersonate Bloodwind. Using Bloodwind's identity, the Manhunter rejoined the Justice League, seeking a power source which would enable Rot to escape from the microworld. So yeah, it was Martian Manhunter impersonating Bloodwind. So it feels like this is just the path into him becoming his own character through this whole thing.
No, but you just said there was a separate character though. He was impersonating this other dude.
Yeah.
So this is just a new version of that old character.
Yeah, with the same name. So I wonder if they'll do a legacy thing, because I didn't catch the first name. Was it Raphael? But yeah, just the idea. If they're just playing on the idea that Bloodwind left a impact on Martian Manhunter, and the Martian Manhunter leaves on this character. If that's how they're going to bring up the idea of Bloodwind now in modern times, I'm kind of okay with that. It's trying to streamline continuity in a way.
I mean, it's all interesting.
Yeah.
So far, so I enjoyed this issue. So. Yeah,
I had a story thought he was something to do with Martian Manhunter being undercover. I did not realize it involved a demon and a blood gem and all this other weird stuff until today. So it was my understanding that he was just Martian Manhunter undercover.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So I didn't enjoy the backup as much as the main story, obviously, but it was interesting for what it was. I'm curious to learn more. So, what are you rating the Doomsday special?
I'm giving this an 8.5.
I'll probably just go straight 8, just because the pacing takes a bit of a hit in the middle of the main story. But the art is pretty good, and the concepts are really strong. I love that it's a Kara and Jean story. I like a lot of the little details they put in, and it made me curious about what they're doing with Doomsday going forward.